Those eyes disguise our hide. Bright lights decide the fight. Your heart beats fast despite the truth that love is blind. I just wanna feel anything.
Welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we are clean and serene with a filthy mind in between. My name is Matthew M. I am your host and I am an addict in recovery. Welcome back, everybody. Cannot believe we are on episode 13. Pretty crazy. Gotta say a huge thank you to everybody for all the support. We already cracked 400 downloads. It just keeps growing from places, like I keep saying, that I don't even understand. I got 2 downloads in Germany. I don't know anybody in Germany. So shout out to whoever it is out in Germany. And shout out to each and every one of you who's helping grow this podcast. You know, it couldn't be done without you guys, without your support, without your continued help. You know, this would not be possible. So thank each and every one of you, whether you're listening on a podcast directory or you're hanging out right now live on YouTube. I love all of you. Thank you. We got to give a huge shout out to our episode sponsor before we get any further in the program, and that is Etc. by Emily. If you're looking for any kind of event staffing or party staffing, or you're looking for a job, make sure to check her information out in the description below. That's if you're here in Arizona. And they can get you set up. So big thank you to our episode sponsor. Really, really appreciate it. Also got to give a quick shout out to all of our VIP contributors. These are the people on Patreon that every month are making a donation to help grow this podcast. And they are Stephanie, Shar, Clint, and Alex. Thank you very, very much. As I've said before, everything that goes, all the donations I get go directly back into the product to help grow this into the best possible product we can have. So if you're interested in becoming a VIP supporter to this podcast, please head over to Patreon. Easiest way to get there is by going to www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. And in the top right corner with all the social media links, there is a link for Patreon. For everybody who donates, you will be getting one of these awesome Clean and Filthy podcast stickers. I finally went and got my car washed, so I am officially branded now. I officially have one on my car, so I'm pretty happy about that. So again, huge thank you to all of our VIP contributors. Really, really appreciate it. Have to also give a big thank you to Mad Decent Records, Valentino Khan, and Alice in Wonderland for giving us the privilege of being able to use one of my favorite songs in history, Anything, as our theme music. Love that song so very much. All the download stream information is below in the description, so make sure to check them out and give some love because they gave us some love. Have to say hello to everybody who's watching right now on YouTube in the live chat. What up, everybody? Get that live chat going. If you are watching on YouTube right now, please make sure to subscribe on YouTube so you get all the notifications when we go live. Or if you're listening right now on a podcast directory, head on over and check out YouTube as well if you want to check out the live stream. If not, please make sure to download, regardless of where you're watching it right now. Please download us on some podcast directory. It really helps our numbers go up. So for those who don't know, we are the Clean and Filthy podcast. I say we because it's Groot and I. Anybody who's listening right now doesn't see me pointing to my Groot that's hanging here. But we are a 12-step based recovery podcast. So that's what we do. We are live every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Arizona time, live on YouTube. If you're interested in watching the live stream, head over to the website. You can get all of our social media information there, and you can hang out in the chat. We get a bunch of people together, have some varying conversations. It's a lot of fun. So definitely check that out. And if you're a new listener, I know I've been trying to get us out on Twitter a lot. So if you're new, welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast. I really hope you stick around and hear something you like. And if you do, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this podcast. That is how we are going to continue getting those downloads and places I have no idea how they're getting there, but I really appreciate everybody taking the time to share this with somebody. I really, really, really appreciate it. And like I said, I couldn't be doing this if it wasn't for all of the help from each and every one of you. So thank you very much. Also, if you don't mind, if you're on a podcast directory and you hear something you like, please make sure to throw us a rating. We don't have many ratings on there because, well, I haven't been asking for people to rate. So if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and rate this podcast if you hear something you like. And if you don't hear something you like, let me know. Maybe there's something that I can improve to make it more enjoyable for everybody. So before we get into our first segment, I want to make sure that we discuss what we are and what we are not. Again, my name is Matthew M. I am an addict in recovery. And this is the Clean and Filthy podcast. As I said before, we are a 12-step fellowship-based, 12-step recovery-based podcast, but we are not representing or speaking from a point of authority for any specific fellowship. I want to make sure to stay in line with all of the traditions within recovery and make sure that I am not directly endorsing one fellowship or another. So I will not be speaking specifically on a fellowship or on a treatment center or on a recovery residence or sober living. I am simply going to be sharing my experience, strength, and hope of what has worked for me in recovery. But if you have questions about those specific things, if you need information about getting a sponsor or getting to a meeting or what treatment center, I am more than happy to answer those questions, just not on air. So please reach out to me at Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, and I'll be more than happy to share all that information with you. But in the form of this podcast, I will not be discussing specific meetings, specific fellowships, my home group, or anything of that nature to make sure that I stay in line with the traditions. So again, that's what we do. That's kind of what we don't do. At the end of the day, this podcast is supposed to be a resource. This is a resource for anybody and everybody who has been impacted by addiction. This isn't just for the addict in recovery or the addict who's not in recovery. This podcast is to help bring awareness to recovery, bring awareness to what recovering addicts go through, and how we can all work together for the common good. So if you're not an addict, but you're here right now, stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. As I always say, the beautiful thing about recovery is that it isn't a drug-specific thing. I've been able to use the tools, both the steps and the traditions and the concepts of recovery, of the recovery fellowships, to grow as a human being and become a better person. So stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. Hopefully you do. If you do, like I said, please share it and really try to get us out there to anybody and everybody so we can help more people. Because at the end of the day, that is the goal. And my goal here is to try and help as many people as I can. So thank you all for being here. I love each and every one of you. And let's get into our first segment.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
That's right. We are here in the lab for some recovery and development. This is the segment of the show where each week we discuss a different step, tradition, concept, or spiritual principle from any different, recovery fellowship that you might be a part of or you might know somebody being a part of. Again, this is not speaking specifically about one fellowship being better than the other or whatever. We're just wanting to discuss what we do in recovery. And what we do in recovery is we work steps and we work traditions and we go over concepts and we develop spiritual principles. So we've already finished the 12 steps, which is pretty crazy, I gotta say. I'm pretty blown away that it's already we're on our 13th week. Pretty nuts. So if you haven't listened to the other episodes from the 12 steps, please check them out. Our episodes are in order because the steps are in order. So through episodes 1 through 12, we cover steps 1 through 12. So please go back, check those out, listen to them, and get an understanding of what we're going into. Because the steps are pretty much like Recovery 101. But now we get into the traditions. And the traditions are a lot more in-depth. I'm going to say that immediately. They're a lot more in-depth. There's a lot more going on within them. The traditions are kind of like that 200 or 300 level class. And if you're looking at like a university system, 100, we get an entry. This is basic prerequisites. But now we're getting into the specialization type stuff. And that's where we get within the traditions. Now, I want to say a lot of the traditions do use fellowship-specific language. So I'm going to edit that out. But I'm still going to read it as it should be. So if you hear a beep edit, that's supposed to be there. So tradition 1 says, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends on unity. All right. So we're talking about unity here. We're talking about common welfare here. And again, these are much more focused on life outside of drug use. Where in the past, the step work is very tied, especially early on, to our drug use, to our active addiction. Well, by the time we get to the traditions, most of us have gotten a few 24 hours away from active addiction. We've gotten a little bit of clean time established. We developed a little bit of an understanding of who we are, of what spirituality is, of, obviously that we are an addict, that we have a higher power. We're trying to align our will with our higher power. We've gone through all of our, things we've done, our resentments. We've, looked at our character defects, hopefully rectified most of them. We've made our list of the people we've harmed. We've tried to rectify all of those. We did our daily inventory. We maintained our conscious contact with our higher power. And then we had a spiritual awakening and give it back. Those are the 12 steps right there in the fastest way I could go through them. For more information, please go back and listen to each episode so you can hear a much more detailed explanation of the 12 steps. But now we're into the principles. And the principles are things that really apply. Now we're into the traditions. Now that we're into the traditions, these apply on a much broader level, within our own recovery journey, within the recovery journey of different groups, as well as the fellowship as a whole. So this goes a lot deeper and takes a lot more, to really understand and really comprehend. So we're going to give some brief overviews, give a little bit of information about each, about this tradition, and then I'm going to explain a little bit of how, it applies within my life. So again, we got to always look at what are the spiritual principles within the step or tradition that we're going over. And since we're going over tradition 1, first one, obviously, first spiritual principle, it says right in the name there, or in the title, unity. Unity, which in addition to being an amazing episode of Rick and Morty, love that show, love that episode, unity is monumental. I mean, it is the key part of this tradition, and we'll discuss it a little bit more. But we also have to look at acceptance. We have to look at love, freedom, selflessness, goodwill, and open-mindedness. So we got a bunch of things to really keep in mind here when we're going through this tradition. So first off, what is unity? All right. Well, it says in the literature that unity is the practical framework that binds us together. I've mentioned unity in the past about talking about things, to find commonalities and not the differences. One of the reasons, we've discussed prior on this podcast about not using drug-specific language, because that automatically causes there to be differences instead of similarities. As we talked about either last episode or the one before that, why we say loaded instead of getting high or getting drunk or whatever, because loaded is a term that can mean anything. That's why we use specific terms to make sure to increase our commonality and therefore increase our unity. That allows us to hear a message more clearly. If the message is a message I can comprehend because it's directly, related to me, I can find the similarities in it and not the differences, I'm much more likely to be able to associate with that. But for a lot of people, when they first hear the term unity, when they first come into recovery, and it's been such a me life, it's been such a me type of life, and now we're saying we instead of me, it can be a scary thing. Honestly, practicing unity can often be an act of belief or of trust or of faith for somebody who's never really experienced it prior. Prior to coming into the rooms, and maybe they have in some little amounts, maybe they played like competitive sports as a kid, and there's some unity within that. But for me personally, I had been so self-centered and self-seeking within my addiction, looking for one thing and looking out for one thing, and that was me. This concept of a group all looking out for each other. That's like that would be like if I was in my active addiction and there was a drug dealer who wanted to make sure that everybody was well, nobody was dope sick. That's not a thing. Just the guy just donating. That's not a thing. There's not a common welfare, whereas within recovery, the common welfare is what keeps us together. That unity is what keeps us together. It says in the literature, it says unity is not just a feeling. It's a decision that shapes our actions and our attitudes. And this is so very true. Having a unified purpose, as we do in the fellowship, having a unified desire to help the addict who's still sick and suffering, to carry the message to the addict who still suffers, is our number one priority. And I had a situation where somebody in the rooms went back to using, and in one of his loaded episodes, or multiple of his loaded episodes, would leave me voicemails talking about how he was going to kill me, he was going to beat me up, he was going to fuck me up, he was going to, do all these horrible, horrible things. And then he showed up at a meeting looking for help. And we did what we do. I went up to him and I gave him a hug. And I said, welcome back. Granted, this was all pre-COVID, hugging, whatever. But that's what we do because we have a unified goal. That was a way for me to show unity with the fellowship, with another addict who was still suffering. And I'm not saying that's always the easiest thing to do. But when we do those things, when we have people come together who might be enemies or might have completely different views of the world for the common good, that's where the magic happens. That's where the beauty really comes alive within recovery. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters when I'm in a meeting is I'm there for recovery. I'm not there to make friends. If I make friends, that's awesome. I'm not there to look good or have my ego fluffed. I am there for recovery. And if I continue to remember that the reason that I am there is to carry the message to the addict who's still sick and suffering, then I'm much more able to get out of self, self-obsession. There's this element like that it talks about is that we're so self-centered. Addicts, we've talked about that. The core of our disease is obsession, compulsion, and complete self-centeredness. So when I'm now asked to look at we instead of me, look at what's best for the greater good instead of what's best for me, when I'm starting to have to employ spiritual principles, not just, on the obvious things, but on the less obvious character defects, the less obvious, the subtle control that I want to have, the subtle ego that comes out, the subtle, feeling I'm better than somebody or smarter than somebody, those things that aren't direct. Because when direct, character defects come out, it's pretty obvious, at this point in my recovery. But those subtle ones, those can take a lot more work and a lot more effort. At the end of the day, what we're doing here, experiencing unity is one of the best ways for us to be restored to dignity. I can tell you personally, when that situation occurred and I saw that dude and I went up and I gave him a hug, it was one of the best feelings I could feel. And even though a couple months later, I got a couple more voicemails saying he was going to murder me, in that moment, it still felt right because I was carrying the message from a unified front. I was doing what the fellowship does. So that in itself made me feel more dignity, because when we care and show respect to others, we respect ourselves more as well. And that can be difficult to do. That can be difficult to do. And we'll discuss that a little bit further as we get a little bit more deep into this tradition. But by doing, dignifying things, we feel more dignified. By doing esteemable things, we feel more self-esteem. That's how we do it. And most basically, unity is attractive. You'll hear a lot of times people will share when they first came into a room, they were so confused because everybody was smiling and happy and had recovery as their most important thing. And that seems so confusing. Like, how could these people not be loaded? How could they be smiling so much? How could they want to go and help somebody so much? Because that's what unity provides. Unity provides the fabric, the backbone, the blueprint for us to be able to continue what was done before us and what will hopefully be done after us, by our predecessors and by the newcomers that come into recovery. And one of those elements is this element of consistency. That's why a lot of times, when we'll talk about this a little bit in service, but you'll hear people say, that the meeting starts at this time. It doesn't start 5 minutes late. Doesn't start, it doesn't go 10 minutes late. It starts at a time and it ends at a time, because that shows consistency, and consistency can be very attractive because consistency shows unity. It shows that sameness. And we'll also talk about unity does not mean uniformity, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But I want to talk about, I kind of want to discuss how unity applies within the member, and then also from like a group and service perspective. So one thing it says in the literature, it says the first tradition makes clear that if we are to thrive as individual members, as groups, and as service committees, our common welfare must be at the forefront of our consideration. As I said before, our common welfare helps us get out of self-obsession, which is the core of our disease. When we start thinking less of ourselves and more of our fellow members, when we stop thinking about the personal opinions or the agendas or the beliefs, when we just keep in mind what our sole purpose is, to carry the message to the addict who still suffers, it means that every one of us needs every one of us. And it allows anybody and everybody the availability of recovery, no matter who you are, no matter what your perspective is, because all those other things don't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat or black or white or Muslim or Jewish or what. Those do not matter. What matters is that common bond, that we are all addicts seeking recovery. And that's where it stops. I'm not an addict who likes this substance. I'm not an addict who listens to this type of music. I'm not an addict who does this. I'm an addict. And that could be difficult for a lot of people. Like I've talked about before, when we come into the rooms and, we want to feel a little different. We want to feel special. Our character defects are still popping up. Like, I'm this kind of an addict. So you're an addict. Yeah, but I'm this kind of an addict. So you're an addict. And at the end of the day, that's all we are. All we are addicts in recovery. It says in the literature, it says, our survival is directly related to the survival of the group and the fellowship. And now this is so true, because the fellowship can survive without me. I know that for a fact. Even like when my ego wants to tell me like, they couldn't do it without me. Obviously they could. They've been around since, a long time ago. A long time ago, since the 50s. I know my fellowship can continue without me. But I can't continue without my fellowship. And I've seen that in my life before. I've seen that because nothing else has ever worked for me to actually stay clean. And I've tried plenty of things. We've talked about it. I've tried geographical relocations. I've tried only using some substances. I've tried drug replacement therapy. I've tried, changing states, lovers, situations, jobs, no jobs. Nothing ever worked for this addict. The only thing that has ever worked was a 12-step fellowship. So I know I can't survive without that 12-step fellowship. As we've talked about before, a lot of us think that we can do it on our own, even when the evidence shows we can't. And that's why it is so important to be involved and be unified within the fellowship. Because we as addicts, we couldn't stay clean on our own, but together, the therapeutic value of one addict helping another is without parallel. And that's why we do things to help each other. That's why we'll go and drive, hundreds of miles to go to a convention in a smaller area. Or we'll, go and celebrate somebody's clean time. Or we'll, make sure that even something as simple as just, saying what's up to somebody, just smiling at somebody, remembering somebody's name. Those are all ways that we can be unified in carrying this message and showing that recovery works. Working together for the greater good is what allows the fellowship to survive. And that can be difficult at times. But one of the most beautiful things that it says in the literature is that we are accepted and loved for who we are in recovery, not in spite of who we are. And this can get difficult sometimes. And I've noticed the longer that I've been clean and the more that I've done, service work at different levels of service, whether it be area or regional, sometimes you start seeing character defects come out. And sometimes we have expectations, and that can lead to resentments. And we start to feel some kind of way about some person. That it's very rare, I've found, that from my own personal experience, that people with, 30, 60, 90 days, a year clean, 2 years clean, will be like, oh, I can't stand that person. For much. Maybe in the beginning, but usually they grow past it. But I've heard so many people with 10 years clean saying, oh, I can't stand that person. They're a dictator, or they're trying to do that. And sometimes what they're saying is valid. There are some times that people get involved with service and try to impose an agenda, or try to impose their opinion, or try to impose their beliefs, rather than being unified and remembering that the only thing that matters is being unified, carrying the message to the addict who still suffers. And, we all have differences. Every single one of us has some difference in our story. But when we can come together and find those commonalities as a group, even if we think we're completely opposite from every other person in that room, we all have one thing completely in common, and that is the desire to stay clean. And sometimes that might be the only thing that we have in common. But if we can focus on that commonality, if we can change our perspective out of the negative, out of the looking for those differences, and find that commonality, that means that we don't have to do this alone. Unity means we don't have to do this alone. So that's kind of how, we employ unity within ourselves. But then we also have to look at it from a group perspective. We find that it says in the literature, we find that what is best for the group is usually good for us. Usually the spiritual option, is going to be good, period. And usually the group, through group conscience, develops what the spiritual option is there. And if we can employ that into our life, things usually are for the better. But this can get difficult. This can get difficult, period. But then when you add a global pandemic onto it, this can get very, very difficult. But sometimes I think it's so important, and I have to remind myself of this, that our purpose, as I've said before, is to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. That's it. Our purpose isn't to put our opinions on things, or put our agendas on things, or try to spin things to how we want it to be. It's to try and carry the message to the addict who still suffers. And that can be difficult. I'm going through that currently within my home group, of trying to find what that looks like. How do we do that safely, responsibly, while respecting other people's feelings about the coronavirus pandemic. And when we already have so many different perspectives and backgrounds and opinions on normal topics, then when you throw a global deadly pandemic on top of it, it's going to bring so many different perspectives as well, because, everybody's experience isn't the same. There are people that haven't been affected by coronavirus at all, who say, oh, it was just like a flu. And there are people who have lost their entire family. So finding that commonality and finding a middle ground can be difficult. So we go back to the point of our purpose is to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. Not the addict who still suffers and this, or not this addict if they... No. Our purpose is to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. It says in the literature, we can disagree without being disagreeable. And you see that a lot. You'll see that a lot, especially if you start doing any kind of service work at a home group business meeting or at an area meeting or at a regional meeting where people can disagree. But that's okay. We can disagree and still respect that person. We can have completely differing opinions. I personally have vastly different world views from sponsee brothers, from some of my sponsees, from some of my friends in the fellowship. But that's okay, because we still have that commonality of an addict helping another addict, trying to carry that message to the addict who still suffers. And that can be, that can cause some turmoil. That can cause some heads to be butt. And it's probably going to happen on this Thursday when I have my home group business meeting, and that's okay. But one of the things it says that I absolutely love, it says in the literature, it says, staying through difficulty is a profound act of surrender. We need each other more than we need our old beliefs. And I know for me personally, there have been times that I got very heated because of something that somebody said. And there have been times that I didn't stick around. I've signed off of I was in part of a subcommittee meeting and somebody made a comment directly towards me, called me a name, which, was pretty unspiritual. And I reacted somewhat unspiritually and I signed off. Could I have handled it better? Yes. Could I have surrendered and stuck it out through that difficulty? Yeah, I probably could have. And I probably should have. But as I always say, I'm human. And I'm never going to be perfect. And I'm never going to respond perfectly to any situation. And that was just an instance of that. And that's okay. Because if I can remember the element of unity, if I can remember how important that piece is within our common welfare, I will be able to respond and not react. I can start to develop a perspective on somebody else and their perspective and their beliefs. And I might not agree with their beliefs. I might not agree with their opinions, but that's okay. Because just as they're free to have their opinions, I'm free to not agree with them. But I have to remember that we need to do what we can to stay unified. So I will say, as difficult as this pandemic has been, as difficult as recovery has been within the pandemic, having that as a opportunity to really remember unity, and in some ways to really even figure out how to be unified, it really is a blessing. And I would not have said that a few months ago. But I'm really trying to change my perspective on this to really understand that we get to walk through these difficulties. This is an opportunity to grow and become more unified. But we got to be open-minded to do that. And that can be difficult. That can be very difficult to open our minds on topics that feel completely antithetical to what we believe. Can oftentimes be an exercise in futility. But it says in the literature, it says, when we are rigid and closed-minded, we can miss the miracle because it doesn't look like we imagined it would. And that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting thing because looking, for a miracle in places or from people that we don't expect can be something that we struggle with. I know personally, I've struggled with that. I've been closed off to certain people. So I would have missed maybe a miracle coming through them, or something that occurred based on somebody that I didn't like that much, or had a feeling or a resentment towards. If I close my mind off, not only am I getting away from any ability to be empathetic or to be unified, but I'm potentially missing out on a miracle. And that's not something I want. That's not something I want at all. So open-mindedness is so important within this. And the beautiful thing is that, it says in our literature, it says our experience of unity allows us to recover in an atmosphere of acceptance, freedom, and love. Everybody isn't going to do it the same way. One size doesn't fit all. And unity doesn't mean uniformity. But when we have that common goal of one addict helping another, that common goal of carrying the message to the addict who's sick and suffering, nothing else matters. We're not this group of addicts, or this group. We're none of those things. We are just addicts. And even though, we are not, unity doesn't equal uniformity, unity does mean that we have that common goal. However we approach that, however we present that, is within the addict individually and then collectively as the group. But again, it doesn't mean uniformity. We also have to look at, the element of service work and how important unity is within service, because that to me is really where unity really pops up. Service work inevitably is filled with a lot of people who usually have a lot of strong personalities, who usually are kind of type A personalities. And you get 35 people in a room, in any room, in any group, and you're going to have some kind of disagreements. And you're going to have some elements where, traditions aren't being followed, spiritual principles aren't being followed. And I think that really just having our common purpose said before any controversial topic is really should occur. It's something that I think so many of us forget about, myself included, especially on things that I feel passionate about, especially on things that I feel righteous about. Self-righteousness is not an asset. Being self-righteous for an addict like me is a character defect. And when I'm passionate about something, I'm a passionate type of dude. And when I'm passionate about something, I can get self-righteous very quickly, and I can tell you why I'm right and you're wrong. And then I can shut off my ears so I don't hear the rebuttal. But if I can view it instead of being open-minded and say, okay, this is my opinion on this is my perspective. That doesn't mean it's the only perspective, but that's my perspective. I'm willing to engage, and let's hear your perspective. When that can occur, when good communication can occur like that, it can be some of the most beautiful things ever. Because so often we find when we're in interpersonal communication that the things that we're hearing might not actually be what was said, or how we're hearing them, or what we think the underlying meaning is. Because somebody like me, I can spin an underlying meaning out of, the most basic thing that's being said. But the more that I focus on spiritual principles, the more that I keep in the front of my mind that we need to focus on unity, the less that I feel that occurs. The less that I will see, that element occurring. Hopefully, very hopefully. It says in the literature that participation is essential to unity. And it is also how we start to feel like we belong. I know that's a fact. Being involved with a home group, being of service, makes me feel a part of, makes me feel like I am a piece within this massive worldwide fellowship. Because again, even though I know the fellowship will continue whether I chair that one meeting or not, or whether I'm of service to this area or to that region or not, it makes me feel a part of. And it makes me, again, feel dignity, feel self-esteem, feel self-worth. So service is so massively important from a unity perspective. And it's also service work is how we continue as a fellowship. If nobody's being of service, then the fellowship wouldn't continue. There wouldn't be meetings. There wouldn't be, conventions. There wouldn't be subcommittees if nobody was being of service. So service is perfectly ingrained within the concept of unity. Selfless service is how we show unity within the fellowship. It's how we grow so that the next person can add to it. So the next person can add to it. And the sum of the parts just keeps growing and growing and growing. And that is the end goal. The bigger we grow, the more people we can help. Same thing with this podcast, in my mind. Same concept, And sometimes it can be difficult. We might have fear. We might have anger. We might have other character defects that come up. But when we are acting in unity, we are able to be free of the fear, of the resentments, of the character defects, of the control or the ego. If we keep that element of unity first and foremost, that allows us to push away a lot of those character defects that will pop up. Sometimes some are easier than others. Sometimes it happens quicker than others. But if we keep that concept of unity in all of our thought processes within service, it allows service to occur much easier. It says in the literature, it says, caring for our common welfare begins in service, but gradually affects all areas of our life. And that is so true. That is so true. Because when we are doing service and we have a unified, plan and course of attack, we go through communication, we go through problem solving, we go through living in spiritual principles and not defects. We get into compassion and to empathy. And these are all things that for an addict like me, I was not good at prior to getting into recovery. Communication, please. My communication skills were, hey, you up? Can I come by? Cool. I don't have any money. Can I trade you this instead? That was my communication. I didn't express my feelings. I didn't express my beliefs. I didn't have any communication. Problem solving? Shit. My problem solving was to solve one problem. That was it. No other problems. How to get more. Period. That was the only problem solving I did. But now, because of being in recovery and because of developing these spiritual principles and because of wanting to work as a unified effort, I can sit in a subcommittee meeting with somebody that I personally, if it weren't for recovery, would have no contact with. I wouldn't fucks with them at all. But we can work together to carry the message for the fellowship. We can work together to help grow this fellowship. And that's absolutely beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. I didn't have empathy. I didn't have empathy prior to getting into the rooms. Now by employing that in my life, I'm able to see other people's perspectives on things. I'm able to grow and understand their perspective and their opinions and their ideals, even if they don't line up with mine. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, I can only control my actions. Period. And that's all I have to worry about controlling. And if I remember that my primary purpose is to carry the message to the addict who's still sick and suffering, I don't need to worry about all those other things that can come up in my mind. I don't need to worry about those character defects popping up. All I need to work on is keeping that front and center in my mind. So I want to close with this quote because it speaks my language perfectly. When I read this, I was like, yeah, that's me. It says, when unity is our guiding principle, there are some arguments we just don't have to have. We can live with differences because we trust the integrity of the bond.
That part.
And that for me is so true. Within the fellowship, within my life, if I use unity as my guiding principle, I find that there's things I just don't need to say. I find that there's times I just don't need to voice my opinion just to hear myself talk. if it's not contributing to the overall purpose, which is to carry the message to the addict who's still sick and suffering, then it's self-serving. If it's not contributing to the overall purpose, then it's not my higher power's will. And that is a struggle for me. But it's something that I'm working on. So, again, the beautiful thing about recovery is it gives me an opportunity to grow. And it gives me an opportunity to become a better person, both inside the fellowship and in the normal world, if you will. So that's what we have for Tradition 1. As I said, the traditions are going to be a lot more in-depth. There's going to be a lot more to them. There's a lot more reading to do about them. There's a lot more parts to go over. But hopefully that gave a little bit of an understanding of what unity does and what our common welfare is and how that all ties together within the fellowship. So that's what we have for Tradition 1. So next up, we're going into my favorite moment of the week. Let me grab a little drink of this Yeet juice. Bang. Please sponsor me. So this is the part of the show where we look at things that have happened over the last week. And I tell you which one's my favorite. Simple as that. Might be something from pop culture. Might be something from sports, news, music, whatever. Might even just be my favorite meme off of Instagram. Might at some point, that point is not today, but it might be my favorite TikTok. I'm never going to be on TikTok. Not once, not ever. But send me them TikToks. All right. So, again, this is my experience, strength, and hope, but it's also a lot of my opinion. This is what my favorite moment of the week was. And as we're doing, because we've kind of changed the segment a little bit, we're going to talk about my favorite moments. Because there's been a lot of fun stuff that's happened this last week. So I can't just line it up to just one moment. So we got to talk about a few things first. Got to give a shout out to one of my best friends. She just gave birth to a beautiful little baby boy. So huge shout out to her. Can't wait till you make it back to Arizona so I can, see him and hug him and squeeze him. He's adorable. So that's what we got first off. Second off, J. Cole dropped Interlude. Song is fire. Cannot wait until off season comes out in 3 days. So stoked for that. The whole song, it's like the sped up soul sample, Kanye style 2000s beat. I really should have seen if Kanye produced it because it sounds like a Kanye beat. Loved it. Got to give a shout out to Brody. Russ, man. Russell Westbrook, officially most triple doubles ever. Never thought that record would be broken. It was broken. Crazy. Craziest video I've seen all week. And I've watched a lot of videos. I'll admit, this week I was really into watching videos of American bullies and pit bulls. Don't know why. I was in a dog video week. So shout out to all the new people I follow on Instagram that are nothing but beautiful pits. But the other video that was crazy was there's a video of a dude in South Africa being attempted to be carjacked. And he was a armored car carrier. And this dude... He's getting his entire side of his car is getting shot out, and he's just driving like whatever, passes his rifle to his homie next to him, like load that, get it going, pulls the car over, hops out, and starts dumping. It was crazy, and everybody lived, so hooray for that. Got to give a rest in peace shout out to Jimmy Rich. Anybody who's familiar with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's one of Robert Downey Jr.'s best friends and assistant. He has massive ties within the MCU, and he passed away in a car accident. Super sad about that, so I got to give him a shout out. Shout out to Lewis Hamilton winning Spanish Grand Prix. Lewis, you're a beast. Keep it going. My favorite moment of sports has to be the back and forth between Lonzo and LaMelo Ball. Like, it literally looked like the videos that LeVar put up on the internet like 8 years ago or whatever, with them just going at it. And I have to say, as well as both of those two Ball brothers are doing, LiAngelo Ball has to be crying somewhere salty as hell, probably in those stolen Versace shades, or maybe they're Louis Vuitton shades, because he could have been in the NBA. Maybe he wasn't as good as the other two Ball brothers, but like, he could have been in the NBA, at least as like a 11th man. Yeah, he fucked up.
That part.
Next up, gotta say, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Hopefully you had a beautiful Mother's Day. I got to share mine with my son and my mother, and she was ecstatic, obviously. It was so different than so many years in the past. So many years in the past, Mother's Day felt like a chore. Felt like, I got to go deal with family. I got to make sure I got enough drugs. I got to make sure I go make bathroom breaks to stay loaded. But this was just a beautiful experience, just being able to make banana nut bread. I will tell you right now, anybody wants to come at me, I will throw down in the kitchen. My banana nut bread is fire. Like, hell yeah. Banana nut bread, bro. Come at me. So it was a beautiful day. You know, much love to all the moms out there. Happy Mother's Day. Got to talk about the trailer for Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I really hope it's good. It has to be better than the first, because the first one, as much as I love Tom Hardy, as much as I love Venom, the first one was not that great. But having Woody Harrelson playing the Cletus Cassidy version of Carnage, I'm super all in. Please don't let me down, Sony. You guys have not had the best track record with Marvel projects, but please don't let me down. Also got to give a shout out, rest in peace to Colt Brennan. He's one of the best quarterbacks in college history. He got injured first season in the league after Hawaii and never played a game in the NFL, and he just died of an overdose at age 37. So pretty sad. Another one of us, you know. And sadly, it's a reality of the disease of addiction. It's what happens. So I had it planned, you know, and as has always happened with my favorite moments of the week, I had it planned for what my favorite moment of the week was probably going to be. And my favorite moment of the week, I had it already. I'm like, my favorite moment's going to be going back to my home group for the first time in 15 months. And that was my plan. And sadly, that wasn't my favorite moment of the week. You know, best laid plans never seem to go how I thought they were going to be in my mind. And whether it being a combination of expectations and things that I thought, I don't know. It wasn't. It was actually a very anxiety-filled, you know, experience with pandemic, COVID possibilities, and like, do I hug this person? Do I not? Now they're coming at me to give me a hug. What do I do? Yeah, it just was stressful. I got to figure out what I'm comfortable with when it comes to going back to meetings in person, because that wasn't it. And if it is for somebody else, I'm happy for you, but for me personally, it wasn't. So my actual favorite moment of the week was my triumphant return with a can of Lysol and a full balaclava-style mask to EOS Fitness. I got back into the gym, y'all. Woo! And oh my goodness, does it feel good. I literally cannot walk. I worked out legs yesterday. I cannot walk. I look like I'm a 60-year-old man right now. Well, probably 80. Probably 80, because my sponsor's 60, and he walks way better than I'm walking right now. I have muscles hurting that I didn't know could hurt. They haven't hurt in 15 months. And as you know, most people know, I've spent the last 15 months working out at my mother's place. And during that time, I put on the quarantine 15 that was actually closer to 25 and have been doing what I could to try and work out as best I could. But there's a difference between working out on a multi-machine and actually working out in a gym. And you know, I understand. It kind of relates back to the going to in-person meetings. I understand people have been saying, like, I need in-person meetings. Zoom, or online meetings aren't doing it for me. I understand that, but from the gym perspective. Because currently, Zoom meetings are still doing it for me. Or virtual meetings are doing it for me. But from a gym perspective, I needed this. I needed to actually be able to work out. And now I will say, working out, doing cardio with a mask on sucks dick. And you know what? I just realized something. Saying that something sucks dick is kind of homophobic in a way. So I think I'm going to change that. Because technically, I'm using an action that billions of people enjoy doing to be a negative. So we're going to change that. I'm going to make a conscious effort to stop saying that something S is a D. And instead, I'm going to say it bites balls. I don't know. Which working out with the mask on bites balls. And if that's what you like to do, I'm sorry. I don't mean any offense. I'm just trying to limit the amount of offense from my initial statement. So it is horrible. It is awful. Because I'm so out of shape as it is that I'm sucking wind like crazy. And now I've got 2 layers of fabric. But guess what? It was worth it.
That part, that part, that part, that part.
Oh my goodness, it was so worth it. In the 15 months that I've been gone, they made some improvements, and they actually have a full Muay Thai bag there that I can kick. I've had some history with their punching bags there. I've broken their punching bag like 8 times in the past. And so maybe they just decided they were sick of me breaking it, and they just put in a full-length Muay Thai bag that I could actually kick. And, oh, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I worked out legs. Why I can't walk today? Parts of my butt are so, wow. Yes, my butt is so sore.
Phrasing?
Yeah, it really do be, though. It really do be. Every single, like my calves, I haven't felt calf pain in 15 months. And I love it so much. Even though my strength was way down. I wasn't trying to max out, but my leg press was like 400 pounds less than what it had been previously maxed out on. Side note, they no longer make my favorite pre-workout, Venom. So I don't know if I'll ever get back up to the 1,100-pound leg press. We'll see. I don't know. I miss Venom. We should start a petition to let Venom pre-workout come back because that stuff was so fire. But what's beautiful is I actually did a full workout. Like, I didn't squat because anybody who goes to a gym knows that waiting for a squat rack is very difficult at times. So I didn't squat, but I did everything else. And I actually did everything else in the same amount of time that I would do about half as much when I was working out at my mom's. Because, as I've said before, that motivation to work out is so much more difficult for me to do when I'm at home or when I'm at somebody else's home. When I'm just sitting there and I've got my phone and I'm on Instagram or I'm playing my Marvel game or I'm, responding to a Snapchat. But when I'm in the gym, I'm there for a purpose. Like, I found myself, I wasn't opening up Instagram. I wasn't opening up my Marvel phone game to play. I wasn't wasting time. Another beautiful thing is I wasn't craving nicotine. Like, this is the first time I've worked out without a vape since I've been in recovery. First time. And even though, like, I still use the little Zyn lozenges, things every so often, when I'm working out at my mom's place, I have one of those in my mouth permanently. When I was there, I wasn't even thinking about it. I was thinking about, okay, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? How much weight can I lift? What can I do with this? And it felt so good. And I actually did cardio and I actually meditated. And I can truly say last night after the gym, it was the best I have felt in a very long time. It was the best I have. And obviously there's a flood of dopamine, and neuroreceptors that are popping off. And I get that. But it was the best I felt, even though I felt hella small. Because when I'm working out at my mom's place and I look at myself in the mirror, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. And then I go to the gym and I'm like, oh, okay. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter because the fact that I was there and I was back working out, it felt right again. It felt normal again. And what's crazy about it is it is quite possibly the safest I have felt in the pandemic. Because everywhere I went, I had my can of Lysol. I sprayed the seat down. I sprayed the individual weights I was using down. I sprayed my hands. Then when I got up, I did it all again. Made sure I was making a conscious effort. Like, don't touch your face. Don't touch your eyes. Don't wipe your sweat. Just let the sweat drip down into your eyes, whatever. And it's weird, I felt safer at a gym full of people, a lot of them not wearing masks, than I did going to an in-person NA meet, an in-person recovery meeting. That's just how it was. The fact that I could keep my distance from people, the fact that I didn't know anybody there and nobody wanted to come up and talk to me and hug me or do anything like that, for me, I felt very, very safe, and I was very happy about that. I'm probably going to go tonight. We'll see. If I can walk, I'm going to go. We'll see. But I'm really excited for tomorrow because tomorrow is push day, so we get to do chest. I haven't lifted on a flat bench in 15 months, and I'm really, really, really excited about it. I'm also really nervous. I got a notification from my Facebook memories like a couple days ago from 8 years ago. And 8 years ago, I was so excited because I could rep 135 finally, which is one plate on each side. And I will say that if I'm only able to do that tomorrow, I might quit the gym forever. So I better be able to do more than that. That's all I got to say. That's all I got to say. If this bang keeps me going, then I'm going to end up, after sharing my home group tonight, I'm going to end up going back to do more work on the heavy bag, assuming my legs are still moving, like, oh, my butt. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But that was definitely my favorite moment of the week. It feels some level of normalcy. And, you know, because of the size of the gym and because of the ability to stay far enough away from people, I felt pretty safe and I felt pretty secure. And to me, having to wear a mask is 100% worth it to be able to be back there and feel right. So that's what we got for this week's My Favorite Moment of the Week. And I'm going back to the gym tonight. Even if I can't walk, I'm going. I'll crawl back in that motherfucker. I don't care. Felt so good. Felt so good. All right. Wow. That's a lot of felt so goods. Anyway, that's what we got for this week's moment, my favorite moment. If you have anything that you want to send over, make sure I check out, whether it be from Instagram or TikTok. I'm not saying TikTok, but if TikTok, that's okay. Just send it on over. I'm on all social medias. You can go to the website, www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. Link to all of my social media accounts. Send me over stuff. I love getting things from my listeners. I think that's super cool. So please do. And now it's time for our next segment.
It's time to ask an addict with your host, Matthew M.
That's right. This is the part of the segment, or this is the part of the show where we answer questions from our listeners and our viewers. If you have any questions that you are interested in having answered on air, please send them over. Again, you can send them directly to me at Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com or right on our website. We have a direct contact us link, and it'll get sent right over to me, or on any social media. You know, you don't get to ask anything. This is like a Reddit AMA, which is Ask Me Anything. It does not have to be just recovery related. So ask away. I like answering questions. And so we're going to answer a couple questions from this week. And then we're going to wrap it up with some clean time shout outs. But first, got a question from one of my boys. He asked, why is the perspective my favorite stick in the God box? And so for those who aren't familiar, at my home group, the night that I chair is this box called a God box. It has a bunch of sticks in it. Bunch of sticks with a bunch of spiritual principles or topics and stuff like that. You pull it out and you share about. So whenever it's kind of a running joke, you know, that whenever somebody gets the perspective stick, you know, they're always like, oh, Matthew's favorite. That's true. Because perspective for me is one of my favorite concepts, spiritual principles, period, within recovery. Because, and we're going to talk about this in a lot more detail on a future event. on a future episode, sorry. But for me, the ability to reshape my perspective on something can be the greatest tool that I have. And being able to look at something where in the past I would have only seen negative. I would have only seen the downside of something. And if I can reshape my perspective to be positive, even if it's the tiniest little sliver of positivity, then that can change my outlook from something being negative to something being positive. You know, I've constantly said before, you know, that there are no bad days. There are no bad days because no matter what happens, if I stay clean, that's a positive. That it means it's a good day. And that comes to perspective. Because there could be days that have a lot of bad moments in them. They can have a lot of bad moments that just build and build and build and build and build. And I could focus on those. I could focus on all the negative things, the bad stuff, the problems, the issues. That could easily be what I focus on. But if I can shift my perspective to looking at the slightest positive, then I can turn a situation into a positive. And that doesn't always happen. And with certain topics, it's a lot more difficult to do than others. With certain interactions with certain people, it's a lot more difficult to do with others than with others. Certain situations in the world, pandemics, you know, make it a lot more difficult to do. But if I'm able to do that, then I'm always living in gratitude. And we talk about the fact that a grateful addict doesn't use. So if I can stay in a positive, grateful perspective, then I'm not going to use. So shifting my perspective doesn't just mean, oh, I'm always a happy individual. It means I'm full of gratitude. And if I'm full of gratitude, then life is going to continue going well as long as I keep that attitude of gratitude. So for me, that's why perspective is so massively important. And I there have been situations that have come up that I have to look at, and it takes a little bit more time sometimes to really shift my perspective on something. I had a situation where I got pulled over one night, didn't know I had a suspended license, pulled over at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and this in recovery, and had to walk like 1.5 miles home in a suit. And the whole time I was salty. I was cussing at everybody that, in my mind as I'm walking home at 4 o'clock in the morning in like December. But then I had a moment where I got to realize that today I'm not sitting in jail. Because so many times in the past, if I would have gotten pulled over at 4 o'clock in the morning, I would have ended up down at 4th Avenue. I need to be grateful for the fact that I get to walk home in these Gucci hard-bottom shoes at 4 o'clock in the morning down Shea Boulevard. I get to do that. And sometimes just changing the wording from, oh, I have to do something, or I'm forced to do something, into I get to do something, allows me to change my perspective. And when I can change it into I get to do something, I'm able to do something. I just had to purchase, I just got to purchase 4 new tires for my car. Went in there to have a nail removed, and even though I've only had the tires like a year, they've already blown through their life cycle. I don't understand it. I don't drive like Lewis Hamilton, but with the amount of tires I've blown through, you would think I do. I drive a Toyota Camry, y'all. It's not like I'm out here drifting and popping donuts. Come on. Drive a Camry, a front-wheel drive Camry. Nothing fun about that. I go through tires faster on this Camry than I did when I had a 350Z. How? I don't know. But regardless, homie said, yeah, it's going to be $550. I said, woo. Well then. But I didn't get salty. I didn't say, man, there goes all that money I wanted to go waste on something else. No, I get to do that. I didn't have to ask my mother. I didn't have to call and beg for somebody's help. I didn't have to get a loan from somebody. I didn't have to say nah and just continue driving on wearing tires, because that's not as important as going and getting the next one. Now I get to do those things. I get to be a responsible human being. I get to take care of normal adult things, even when I don't want to spend the money on them, or the time, or the energy. But I get to do those things. So again, perspective is what shifts it from I had to do something to I get to do something. Perspective is what can change a negative into a positive, or at least maybe not into a positive, but at least into a not bad. If I were to get, beat up tomorrow, I wouldn't say, oh, hey, that's a positive, but at least I'm not dead. And sometimes that's what we got to look at. At least I'm clean. There are some days that is the only thing that I can cling to, but I'm clean. There have been days within my recovery that had a lot of bad moments in them. But I could always cling to that perspective shift that I'm clean. So therefore, it's a good day. So that's why, to me, perspective is the greatest stick in the box. What's in the box? Sorry, I love that movie. Love 7. But that's for me why I love that stick so much. I share about perspective every and any chance I get, and we will be discussing it more further as well. So it will be discussed in more depth at a later date. So that's the reasoning for that. Thank you for the question, my brother. Appreciate it. Next question I got, and this is kind of ties into what we had last week. It says, what is a 12-step call? And you might have heard of it, at some point. For people who aren't that familiar with the fellowship, what a 12th step call means, and it's as we talked about, last week in the 12th episode, is that, having had a spiritual awakening from working the steps, we, tried to carry this message to the addict who still suffers, to share and care, right? So what 12th step call, what it originated in was when an addict would call a member in a dire situation. Like an addict has relapsed, is sitting at a crack house, and calls his sponsor, let's say. And his sponsor and another member, you always want to do a 12-step call with two members, would go to that place and help that addict, whether get him to a meeting, whether get him to treatment, whatever it is. That's what the essence of a 12th step call truly meant. Now, I will say, since I've been clean, I have not been part of a formal 12th step call. I've been kind of part of an informal one. There have been a couple times standing outside the fellowship that, me and another member or two were trying to get this guy to go into treatment. But I've never been, called from, somebody at a dope spot like, hey, I need to get out of here. Help me.
Help me!
I downloaded that one. I had to have an excuse to throw that in there at some point. But, I never had that experience as of yet. I hope to have that at some point, because when somebody calls you, it is an honor to be able to help somebody in their time of need. In their time of need, they, again, unity. It's how we give back, by being there, by being able to answer that phone, by being able to help that person. But as of now, I from what I've heard, like true 12th step calls in that form don't happen as often as they used to. And I don't really know the reasoning for that, but that's what a 12th step call is. A true 12th step call is when an addict who's in trouble or using, calls a member of that, usually their sponsor or somebody, and then that person and somebody else, again, always two people, go and remove the person from that situation and get them to a meeting or get them to a treatment center or, something to help the addict who's still sick and suffering. So that is what a 12-step call is. I've had that question asked a couple times, and then once we mentioned it, once we discussed the 12-step last week, I figured we had to answer that one today. And then the next question, and this ties in well with the perspective element I got, was how do you deal with really extreme feelings that in the past would have led to using? And this can definitely be something that's difficult for a lot of people, especially early on. It can still be difficult for me a lot of times. One of the things that I often will do is I will just try to ignore something, and that's not healthy. I'll try to ignore a feeling. I won't want to process it, or I won't want to sit with it. But for me personally, the most important thing I can do is to sit with the feeling, no matter how painful it is. Because we've talked about before, Enneagram types. And I'm an Enneagram type 7, and I like to do everything I can to be avoiding pain. So for me, the result is I have to lean into that. I need to sit with it. I need to sit with that feeling. And whether that means cry or scream or go to a meeting and rant about it, I need to sit with that feeling before I can truly process. Because if not, I'm going to react. I'm not going to respond. So being able to eliminate that impulse is massively important for me, because like I've said, I can burn my entire life down very quickly. I know I can. But by being able to remove that impulsive reaction and instead sit and then think and then process and then respond, that just slows down the whole process of it. And when I slow it down, I'm much more likely to make a correct statement, a correct action, as opposed to my first thought, let's go this way, let's do this. And, it impulsively reacting is usually not the best for somebody like me. But then I'll tie into the last and most difficult part of it. And that is the fact of changing your perspective. And rather than saying, why does this happen to me? Or why did this occur? Why am I feeling this way? Saying, I get to experience this, and I get to experience this clean. And I'm not saying that's going to be easy to do, especially when it comes to massive, life things, somebody dying or, getting super sick or losing a limb or something like that. But that truly can be one of the best ways to work through those feelings is, for me personally, is saying I get to go through this, and I get to go through this clean. And therefore, showing I was able to get through this clean, that could help somebody else in the future. And that's a difficult thing to do, because feelings can feel, they can be a lot, even though feelings are not fact. A lot of times they feel like they are. I've had feelings that I felt to my soul, and I felt that that was how it was, period. But it's not. Feelings are just feelings. And for me personally, if I sit with them, I will get clarity. And if I still can't get clarity, I'll pray about them. I'll meditate about them. I'll ask for guidance. I'll talk to other people about them. The most important thing is I don't go through them alone. That is the most important thing, is there's no feeling that I have felt since I've been in recovery that I've gone through alone. Every single feeling I have felt, positive or negative, I have gone over with somebody in my recovery, within my circle. Another reason why we say get a large foundation, get a large group, be a part of a large herd, so that you have people to reach out to talk with, to go over things with. That's what we do. As we talked about earlier, we're never alone. We are never alone. And this program makes sure that's the case, as long as we do what we need to be doing within it. So that's what we got for this week of Ask an Addict. We're almost time to close up, but we got to get to those clean time shout outs first. So this is the time of the show where we give shout outs to people who have reached universally accepted milestones within recovery. Those are newcomer, which is 0 to 29 days clean. That's 30 days clean. That's 60 days clean. 90 days clean. 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, 18 months, or multiple years clean. But we also like to do it a little different here. So we like to recognize big numbers. So if you've got 100 days, 500 days, 1,000 days, 5,000 days, we also want to give shout outs for those. Beautiful thing about this, as we talked about earlier, this is how we show unity. We celebrate together. We get excited for each other. So that's what we do here. If you personally are celebrating between now and next episode going live on Tuesday, the 18th at 5 p.m., please send your clean time over to Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, and I will make sure to get you on the list to give you a shout out here on air. So we do this every single week. So first and foremost, we got 2 newcomers again. Big shout out to Lauren, newcomer, well done. And then we've got Kimberly, newcomer, welcome, well done. Next up with 30 days, we've got Joe, well done. And then we've got Monique with 30 days. Then we've got Brian with 30 days. And we've got Brianna with 30 days. Well done, y'all. Next up, we've got Paul with 60 days from our home group. Well done, man. Well done. Next up, all the way, one of my boys from the East Coast. We got my man Ed with 18 months and a half. Yeah, we give them bups for each year, just for anybody who's new to the program. Then we got my boy Clint, the dude who makes all the fly Clean for Life designs. We got Clint with 18 months and a half. Next up, we got my homegirl Rachel with 2 years. Then next up, out in Vegas, we got my boy Johnny with 22 years. And 22. And then finally, with 38 years clean, we got my sponsee brother and my fellow home group member, my man Brad with 38 years.
22
I couldn't count that high. I'm telling you, homie been clean longer than I've been alive. That's nuts. Absolutely nuts. So shout out to each and every person who got clean time. I love clean time shout outs. Congratulations, everybody who got clean time shout outs today. If you didn't get a clean time shout out today, don't use and keep coming back. And guess what? You will. That's literally how this program works. So again, if you have clean time coming up, make sure to send it over to me so I can get hype, getting it hype for y'all. I absolutely love, man, I love clean time. It's one of my favorite things. I love it. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. Great episode. I love all of you. Thank you for making it to 13 episodes. Absolutely crazy. Huge shout out again to our episode sponsor, Etc. by Emily. All her information below. Big thank you to Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland, and Mad Decent Records for the beautiful soundtrack to this podcast. And before we go, I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of my recovery for the last hour and a half. And remember, if nobody's told you they love you, I love each and every one of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. See you guys next week, y'all.
I just wanna feel anything.